Okay, welcome to the class. There were a couple of things which I wanted to tell before I start my class. One is your mini project has been allocated. The guides have been allocated and they'll be the same as your technical seminar guides. Right. Regarding this, I have just sent out a mail a few minutes back. Second is I have put a link in your WhatsApp group. Right now, this link is for enrolling yourself for the internal assessment quiz. Right, you need to fill in all the details what is requested for that particular link. Right, if you go to that particular link, you may see that it's a basically a spreadsheet. Right, it asks about a serial number, USN, name of the candidate, and email ID. Right, so you just have to open that particular sheet and enter these details. And after entering these details, just close the tab so that we can get all the details. Now, this is supposed to be done before 5 p.m. of today, right? Because there is a plan of having an internal assessment quiz anytime next week. Is that clear?
Yes, sir.
Yeah, yes,
Yes,
sir.
sir.
Okay. So I will just start my class, right? And also mini project, there are certain details which I have sent, right? Just follow those guidelines, phase 1 and phase 2. Eventually, after the time passes by, I will share you the mini project report and what you are supposed to do and things like that. Okay, we were doing unit 4, right? MapReduce applications. We were doing the properties, in fact. Right, these were the properties that we had stopped with in the last class, right? If you remember. Okay. So now, after you have configured all these properties, right, which are there in different property lists, which is being given, right, as a part of MapReduce 1 or MapReduce 2, right, the basic focus, what we were trying to do in the yesterday's class was also the spill size, right? How will the data, which is stored in different buffers, get spilled onto disk partitions? Right, you are just randomly throwing the data away on different spills, right? That is what it basically means, right? So this was something that we were trying to look out in with respect to this shuffle and chart as well as spills, whatever that we were trying to discuss, right? So next, all these properties, whatever that we have seen in the table, is a part of the jobs configuration, right? Using the configuration method, that is configure of, you should be able to configure the mapper as well as the reducer, what is being passed in the argument, right? There are several APIs, there are several properties which is being there, and you should be able to do these configurations when the object of that particular thing is passed on to the mapper or the reducer, right? Remember, mapper and the reducer are just the interface in the definition, right? And these interface definitions will have only the abstract methods. They are non-concrete methods, right? They are if you have to make them as concrete methods, you will have to override them and put the details of the respective map function and the reduce function, whatever that you wish to write, right? Yesterday's example, whatever that we saw, the buffer size was 100 MB, right? But Hadoop 1.0 used a buffer size of 4 KB by default. Now, the reason why 4 KB was used as a default here was some of the cache did not have so much of capacity as when compared with the main memory to have such a huge buffer size for doing the processing. So if you have to work very well within the ambit of the cache, what is being provided, which may be 1 MB, 2 MB, or whatever it is, you should be in a position to have a buffer size which is closer to your execution unit, which is of a lesser size. That was the overall intention of making it as 4 KB. So if you try increasing it, it again depends on various aspects, right? The second thing here is the tuning of the runtime parameters. The runtime parameters which are used in the Hadoop setting is the CPU, memory, disk, and network, which basically are 4 factors that depend on your performance, right? So if the performance has to be improved, the individual CPU cycle should be good. You must have a large memory. You must have a good amount of storage space in disk. You must have a high-speed network. These were the 4 important parameters, and the options that will be set with these parameters, which the performance will depend on, right? So when you are talking about memory and disk spills, it is basically contracting or connecting with the point of memory, right? You must have memory which is usable memory, right? And that particular usable memory should be help you to run any kind of MapReduce task. So the first and the foremost is you cannot tune CPU. The reason is because CPU is already bounded item, right? There is no possible way for you to do CPU tuning because the number of cycles, the speed of this processor, the number of cores that the processor has, and the internal architecture of the processor, these are all something which is very fixed. You cannot change that. It's a bounded detail. So when you talk about memory in general, this is something which is not so bounded. The reason is because there are certain amount of privileges that is given for a user to do memory tuning. Now, what are these things? Given the amount of memory which is given to the JVM, right? You may opt for less number of child tasks to be loaded onto the memory, or less amount of map tasks to be loaded onto the memory, right? Based on which you can either overload or underload the memory, right? When you overload the memory, again there is a performance bottleneck. When you underload the memory, there is a lack of utilization of memory, which leads to optimization and underutilization of resources. So to avoid this, there is a threshold or a trade-off that you should basically do, right? Number of jobs which sits in the number of tasks which basically sits in the task queue, and the number of the size of the memory which is available to you to make the jobs work, right? So based on this particular threshold, you will have to decide what level of memory tuning will you be able to do for the map and the reduced tasks, right? Now, the other important thing is the disk spills happens, right? When you take a vessel full of milk and then you spill it over, you do not expect that milk drop to exactly place itself on the plate which is there in the opposite. You may see some of the drops which has spilled out of the plates. You may see that the spills are outside. So there is a possibility that you waste the spill also. In a similar manner, the data spills which happens in a map or a reduced task will also have the same effect, right? The spilling is not a very ideal condition, that you only spill into the respective partitions and not over it, right? So this is not possible in a real-time case, right? So because of which you can see that the disk IO usually has a performance bottlenecks. That is, the disk keeps writing, overloading, overwriting on the same set of tracks and sectors, and because of which you see that there is a heavy IO operations that are involved on the disk. So if you want to enhance the optimality of using the map disks, and avoid multiple spills on the disk, one optimal solution what can be brought out is that you understand what is the size of your output, map output, and based on the estimation of the size of the output, you minimize the number of spills that is required after it is being sorted. Now, when you reduce the number of spills, there is a situation where in which you can ideally ensure that the spills are not too much, right? And you are not wasting too much. It is as good as you just tilt a vessel to a small angle so that the milk spills at a very slow rate, right? And it does not spread over as if someone has taken a tumbler and washed it, right? So that should not happen. So you bend the spills to a minimum level so that the spill wastage is reduced. So again, the total number of records that will be spilled onto the disk over a particular job is to be tuned, and this depends on the number of map jobs and number of reduced jobs and the number of spills that they are being created for this particular purpose. Spills are obvious, right? You cannot avoid it. The reason why you cannot avoid it is that after the map output is done, the sort and shuffle phases will start, which will basically make the data to spill over multiple reduced tasks or multiple processes, right? And the spill is an inevitable process in Hadoop systems, right? There is no way that you can go away from it, right? So on the reducer side, when the spill is happening, right, you can ensure that this reducer has certain amount of memory reserved for its function, and you know that the number of reducer function is always less than the number of map function, and reducer function will have lighter memory requirement when compared to the map functions. So hence you ensure that there is certain memory reservation which will increase the buffer size of the reduce function, so that the spill which is being made by the map function can easily take into account. So when you come to the task execution where the performance tuning is required, the task execution is an imperative aspect of the Hadoop cluster. That is, the task execution is to happen to the locality of reference or locality of execution. Wherever the data is nearer, there should be the place where the task execution should happen. Wherever the data is farther off, either you think of spanning a task in that particular place so that the execution happens, or you have a minimal distance of data copy for your task execution, right? You know that in your distance formula, the highest distance is for the data which travels from one data center to another data center, and the distance for that is 8, right? You look out for an ideal scenario where the data is either located in the same node or in the same rack, where the speed of movement of the data is fast, right? So thereby your task execution can happen at a faster rate. So when you configure certain aspects of the Hadoop job, the Hadoop job wants the variables for the streaming programs, and they are to be a non-alphanumeric characters with underscore only, right? So if you see at the example which is shown at the bottom of the slide, you can see that os.environment double quotes map red underscore job underscore id, complete the quotes and the square bracket. So this is basically a non-alphanumeric characters is what we are basically using to ensure that the names are valid names. The job names are valid names, and this is basically set during the job configuration. You have a class called as job configuration class, which will where you have to ensure that the job ID created is a non-alphanumeric character. And also, you should know that the context of the objects that are being passed for the mapper and the reducer are based on the new parameters and new signatures which are told by the which are given by the APIs, newer APIs. So these are the properties of the job that you are trying to submit, and these are the examples of this particular job. Now, for example, if the job ID is being taken, the job ID is basically a string consisting of job underscore some numbers followed by some numbers, right? And then you have got map reduce tip ID, which is again a task ID, nothing but. Even this is a string, and the string is in this particular format. Similarly, you can also have attempt ID, task attempt ID, which is in this string format. You can also see the number of partitions for the task trackers. It is an integer type. The value of it is the example value of it is 3. Maybe any number of partitions that you are going to create. So with respect to map, it's a Boolean function, whether it is the task has a map task or not a map task. It's a Boolean function. It may either be set to true or false. So we come to a very important part of task execution, and this is called as speculative execution. Now, what is speculative execution? The MapReduce, as we already know, that the MapReduce model is basically working on the jobs, where the jobs are divided into tasks. The tasks are divided into either a map task or a reduced task, and all these job execution basically happens parallelly. However, the task runs sequentially in that particular mission. Now, the job execution time is very sensitive for us to understand how long will a job take to complete, or how fast does a job take to complete. When a job consists of hundreds or thousands of tasks, the possibility of few struggling tasks is very real, right? Now, Hadoop does not tries to fix certain slow running tasks, right, which are struggling to get some resources, which are struggling to complete itself. So it does not make an attempt to do that. What it tries to detect when a task is running in a slower rate than expected is that it launches another equivalent task as a backup task. Now, this is called a speculative execution of task. Now, this scenario occurs in a very, very rare scenario. That is, when a task that you have created does not run in an actual run rate that is expected for the task to execute, rather a lesser amount of tasks. So in such particular case, the Hadoop basically launches another equivalent task as a backup task, and this is called a speculative execution of task. Now, the reason why this can happen is that the task tracker constantly keeps beaming the heartbeat to the job tracker. Now, when the heartbeat starts reducing and the interval extends up to 7th minute or 8th minute, and there is a probability that it can go out of bound out of 10 minutes also, because the interval what you have set for a heartbeat to reach is 10 minutes. If you do not see a heartbeat within 10 minutes, there is a possibility that the current task be terminated and a new task be spawned for it. Now, there are tasks which go up to 7th, 8th minute or 9th minute kind of a scenario, which runs very, very slow than expected. And the heartbeats of the same do not come to the job tracker as what is required. Right? In that case, what Hadoop plans for is, it sees that this may be a task which may be going for a failure. So it spawns another backup task for the same task. And that is called as speculative execution of tasks. Now, speculative execution does not work by launching two duplicate tasks. You should not have the idea that you are duplicating the task. It is only a preemptive measure which is taken to make sure that under such circumstances, there may be a possibility of a job failure. So, when a task completes successfully, the duplicate task or the speculated task which is running will also be killed, as it is no longer required. 90% of the cases, what also happens is that the task which run into 8th minute or 9th minute of the heartbreak will continue with the same consistent heartbeats in the 8th minute or the 9th minute, and successfully complete the task at the end of it. So if it is successfully completing it, both the original task is completed, the duplicate task will be killed. If the original task completes before the speculative task gets killed. If the speculative task gets finished first than then the original task will be killed. Likewise, the speculative execution is a de facto standard which is maintained in Hadoop system. It can either be enabled or it can be disabled based on the requirement of the user. But a cluster-wide setup or the configuration is the speculative execution is always turned on by default, right? So this is on a per job basis or this is on a per task basis, right? The task will always be open. So these are some of the properties of speculative execution. You may see that the MapReduce task, speculative execution, it's a Boolean true by default. And you can also see that the reduce speculation task is also true by default. The class which is responsible for speculative execution is this particular class, job.speculator.class. Okay, where the speculator class is implemented. Now this policy was implemented only in MapReduce 2.0. This was not available in MapReduce 1.0. So we finally come to a very important place of the output committers. It's very important to know that in any system where a data processing happens, where some kind of a computing processing happens, it is identically very important to understand what is the input that you have provided for the system, what the system is trying to process, and what is the output. Now, when you come to the output, how you are trying to put across the output, whether you are trying to put it on a textual basis, you are trying to put it on a graphical basis, output is in a monitor, output is in a file, output is in a printer, output is in different format. What format are you trying to commit in a Hadoop based system? That output committer is what is the class which deals with such kind of output formats. Now, say suppose a particular task or a job has succeeded as or failed. If in case of success, there are certain steps it follows. In case of failures, it writes everything on the log. Right? That's the reason why I told there are three interfaces in Java. One is the standard input interface. The second is a standard output interface. The third is a standard error interface. Right? This is there in C also. So these are the formats which is standard input output formats which will be used for writing the output. Now the output committer job is to work as a commit protocol. It is basically used for committing the output of that particular job. Now, how does this particular thing basically happen? There is a API which is associated with it, and output committer itself is a class in Hadoop based system. So there are different methods which are used in this. One is set output committer, get output committer method. Set output committer method is used for setting the job output commit format. The get output format is to determine what is the output format that is used for that particular job. So output committer is done at the time of job run itself. It is configured at the time when the job configuration happens, when the job setup basically happens. So at the time of job initialization itself, you determine what is the output of the job that you are trying to look at. And for all the cases of the output, the default output committer format is a file. And hence we use this particular class which is called as file output committer. This file output committer is a subclass of the output committer. And this is stored in a directory called as MapReduce output.directory. This is a temporary output working directory for that particular task. Now, when a task basically, or when a job basically succeeds, it calls a method called as commit job. which is a default file-based implementation that deletes the temporary working space and creates a hidden empty marker file in the output called as underscore success. The operations are similar at the task level. The setup task method is called before the task is run, and the default implementation does not do anything with respect to that. So when the task succeeds, it also calls something called as commit task method, which writes the output onto the temporary task output directory. So the next is, you should understand that MapReduce comes with the types and formats. Okay, every MapReduce data processing jobs has an input format and has an output format, right? So this is basically configured by the map and reduce functions. And the default format that they use for doing the communication between map to the reduce is a key value pair, right? So your map is converted into a list of key value pair. The combine uses this particular list of key value pair associated with a particular key and reduces it into single key and a single value kind of a system. The reduce also can take alternatively instead of combine and also do something called as K3 and V3, change the key value as well as the value associated with that particular key. The map input key and the value types are different from the map output types. This is something that you should note, right? The output type and the input key values are different. That's the reason why the nomenclature or the convention which is used in this particular slide are used to show that they are indifferent values. The reduce input must have the same type as the map output. Although the reduce types may be different again, which is K3 and V3. So this is a very, very important condition for matching the parameters before you go ahead with um, certain aspects of programming. So if we use a combine function instead of a reduce function, this has the same effect as a reduce function itself, where the intermittent key value types are reduced into a single key value system. Right? There can also be a possibility that when a combine function is used, a partition function may also needs to be used along with that. Right? This is basically creating the partition index with the key value pair that is being stored. Right? That is partition of K2 V2 is a integer type. So the MapReduce types, input formats, what is allowed is a text input format which uses the key of long writable. Then you have the values of text. If you have K3 and V3, which are of the same type, then you need not have to call the method called a set map output key, since it falls back on the same output key class. If V2 and V3 are same, then there is no need to call set output value class, right? So these are some of the settings which you need to understand with respect to the input types. So this is a sample program which is with respect to these input types, right? So you may take a snapshot of this, or the slide will also be shared to you at the later slide time. You may use this for taking a snap now. Okay. So The remaining part of it we will see in the later class.